How do two men neatly dressed in suits end up dead on a lonely Brazilian hillside, their faces concealed by bizarre masks made of solid lead? In August of 1966, a quiet hill in Brazil became the center of a baffling mystery. Two bodies, cryptic notes, and countless unanswered questions. Decades later, we are still left wondering, what truly happened that day on Vintém Hill? 1. The Discovery. Rio de Janeiro, August 20th, 1966. A quiet, cloudy afternoon blanketed the hills of Niterói, seemingly ordinary until a young boy named Jorge de Costa Alves decided to fly his kite atop the isolated slopes of Morro do Vintém, known locally as Vintém Hill. Jorge navigated through thick grass, stepping carefully over rocky terrain, eyes upward to guide his kite throughout the gusty breeze. Suddenly, something in the grass caught his attention, a disturbing shape that made him stop in his steps. Moving closer, Jorge discovered an eerie, surreal sight. Two motionless figures, partially hidden among the overgrown grass. Terrified, Jorge abandoned his kite and ran seeking immediate help. It wasn't long before the authorities were called and bodies, accompanied by firefighters, attempted to get to the bodies. When they finally reached the scene, the haunting strangeness of the discovery became clear. The two bodies lay neatly beside each other, partially concealed by grass. There was no visible trauma, no immediate signs of violence, and no evidence of any struggle. Both men impeccably dressed in formal suits, an unusual choice for the rugged, isolated environment. Over their suits, they wore more waterproof raincoats, a peculiar detail considering the dry weather conditions. But this was just the start. Covering each man's eyes were unusual masks crafted from solid sheets of lead, shaped meticulously to obscure vision completely. Homemade and bizarrely specific, these masks raised immediate questions. Were they protective gear, part of an experiment, or something completely different? Next to the bodies, the police found further intriguing items. An empty water bottle, two wet towels carefully packaged, and a modest sum of cash. Perhaps most perplexing of all was a small notebook, scribbled hastily with cryptic instructions. 16:30, be at the specified location. 18:30, ingest capsules after the effect. Protect metals, await signal mask. These cryptic, almost ritualistic words just deepened the mystery. Capsules? Awaiting a signal? Protecting metals? What could these strange instructions possibly signify? As investigators stood on that hill looking down at the two deceased men, they were confronted with an overwhelming number of questions. What had gone so wrong? The lead masks case, as it would soon be called, had begun a serious puzzle wrapped in layers of bizarre clues, each one leading to deeper uncertainty. 2. The men behind the masks. Police quickly identified the two men as Manuel Pereira de Cruz, 32, and Miguel Jose Viana, 34, both married and residing in Campos de Goytacazes, roughly 175 miles northeast of Niterói. These weren't adventurers or known thrill seekers, rather they were respected electronics technicians, professionals well regarded in their community for their reliability and competence. Their routine lives in Campos were ordinary, filled with family duties, community interactions, and their shared professions. Neighbors described both Manuel and Miguel as quiet, responsible men committed to their work and their families. Their very mundane life made the circumstances of their death even more confusing to those who knew them. The events leading up to their mysterious demise began unusually. On the morning of August 17th, 1966, Manuel and Miguel informed their families they were traveling to Sao Paulo. They claimed their trip was to purchase electronic equipment and possibly a second-hand car, a reasonable explanation given their trade. However, instead of Sao Paulo, they boarded a bus headed for Niterói. Upon their arrival around 2 p.m., their behavior became notably peculiar. First, the men visited a local store where they purchased identical waterproof coats, an odd choice given the day's weather conditions, which didn't agree with their precaution. Later, they stopped at a small bar to purchase a bottle of mineral water. Curiously, they saved the receipt, implying they intended to reclaim a deposit by returning the empty bottle, a detail suggesting planned activities rather than impulsive decisions. Witness testimonies further illuminated their odd demeanor. The bar's cashiers vividly remembered Miguel exhibiting noticeable anxiety, repeatedly glancing at his wristwatch as he appeared increasingly nervous and impatient, suggesting anticipation or fear. This brief encounter left a lasting impression on the cashier, who would later recount this to the police. The final sighting of Manuel and Miguel occurred around 3:15 p.m. Witnesses reported seeing two men hitch a ride toward Vintém Hill with 3 or 5 unidentified unidentified individuals driving a jeep. Their reports vary about the size of the group. This moment marks the last known interaction anyone would have with them while they were still alive. Adding another unsettling detail to the already perplexing case was the considerable sum of money they reportedly carried, roughly 3 million cruzeiros, intended presumably for their stated purchase of a vehicle. Given the extreme inflation rates in Brazil at the time, converting the sum precisely is challenging. Nonetheless, though, it was enough money to trigger suspicion when investigators later found that only a fraction remained on their persons. In the notebook previously mentioned, it contained a series of electronic parts numbers. Initially, these part numbers sparked wild speculation about encrypted messages or coded communications. Subsequent analyses by various experts, however, suggested they were likely legitimate references relevant to their profession rather than secretive codes. As these strange details surrounding Manuel and Miguel's final hours piled up, police knew they faced an extraordinary mystery. With more questions arising at every turn, investigators soon realized that solving the lead masks case would require delving deeper into the baffling clues and complex circumstances left behind. 3. Investigation. The police were confused. The bodies of Manuel and Miguel showed no obvious external injuries, and initial observations provided little clarity. The men's bodies, already partially decomposed by the time they were examined weeks later, offered investigators limited forensic information. Crucially, this delay in performing autopsies prevented any effective toxicological analysis, leaving one of the most important questions answered: whether Miguel and Manuel had ingested any harmful substances. At the core of the investigation was the cryptic handwritten note. Investigators speculated intensively on the meaning behind those bizarre instructions. Were the men waiting for a specific event or individual? Did protect metals indicate some involvement with radioactive or sensitive material? And what did the phrase "awaits signal mask" imply? Was it literal or symbolic? And the mystery capsules? Well, they were nowhere to be found. But after deeper investigation, another intriguing piece of evidence came in the form of additional paper notes discovered alongside the victims. One note contained a series of daily instructions. Sunday, 1 capsule after meal. Monday, 1 capsule in morning while fasting. Tuesday, 1 capsule after meal. Wednesday, 1 capsule when laying down. The timeline matched the events leading up to their deaths, with Wednesday, August 17, 1966, being the day they were last seen alive. The instructions to take a capsule when laying down seemed to correspond with their final moments on Vintim Hill. It suggested a methodological preparation involving capsules over several days, possibly hinting at a gradual ritual or experiment. A third note, even more cryptic, read, "Buy a 500-meter long thread roll." No clear explanation exists for this instruction. Further complicating matters, a sheet of blue-silver paper was also found, covered in equations related to Ohm's law, a fundamental principle in electrical engineering. Or maybe the most mysterious item at the crime scene were the lead masks covering the eyes of each man. Handmade from thin lead sheets, crudely cut into sunglasses-like shapes without stems. These masks offered no practical use in any known environment, whether protective against radiation nor functional as standard protective eyewear. But also, the formal suits suggested an expectation of meeting someone important, though without knowledge of their usual dress habits. This was purely speculative. The towels and jackets implied anticipation of moisture or rain, yet there was no clear reason why they would expect such conditions. Due to these unresolved elements, initial conclusions drawn by the investigators proved insufficient. The lack of conclusive evidence, partially in the absence of toxicological analysis, left investigators frustrated, with critical questions unanswered and leads running dry. Authorities struggled to provide the families and the public with satisfying explanations. 4. Connections and unexplained revelations. About a month into the investigation, the police revisited the suspicious inconsistencies in statements made by Elcio Gomez, a commercial pilot and former associate of Manuel. Elcio had initially been dismissed as a suspect due to his solid alibi, placing him nearly 4 hours away at the time of the incident. However, renewed questioning brought unexpected and troubling insights. Elcio Gomez disclosed something startling. He, Manuel, and Miguel had all been involved in a secretive group of self-proclaimed science scientific spiritualists. The group, composed largely of electronics technicians across Brazil, pursued unusual methods to achieve their ambitious goal, establishing communication with extraterrestrial beings. According to Gomez, their experiments frequently combined technology with spiritualistic rituals, an approach that, despite its questionable scientific credibility, attracted numerous participants. Supporting Gomez's claims, police discovered corroborative evidence in Miguel's home. Investigators found tools matching those likely used to craft the lead masks, along with scraps of lead consistent with the mask's material. More tellingly, Miguel's personal library contained literature on scientific spiritualism, with specific passages emphasizing the risks of encountering powerful spiritual entities emitting intense, blinding luminosity, perhaps providing context for the mask's otherwise baffling design. Complicating the case further, authorities uncovered a disturbingly similar incident from 1962 involving another electronics technician named Hermes Luiz Feitosa. Hermes had been found under strikingly comparable circumstances, his body discovered on a hilltop with a handmade lead mask nearby. This parallel suggested a pattern, hinting that the deaths of Manuel and Miguel were not isolated but rather connected by common practices or beliefs. Further speculation arose about the possible use of hallucinogenic substances during these experiments. Gomez hinted at the group's belief in certain psychedelic drugs and how they might heighten telepathic sensitivity, enabling participants to communicate more effectively with extraterrestrial beings. This theory gained plausibility when linked to the cryptic notes found with the deceased men, particularly the instructions involving capsules. These revelations painted a complete and unsettling picture. Far from being a simple case of unexplained deaths, the lead masks incident now seemed part of a larger web of secret rituals, risky experiments, and potential dangerous practices undertaken by a network of scientific spiritualists. As authorities and the public grappled with these alarming new leads, attention shifted to various theories, each attempting to untangle the bizarre circumstances surrounding these deaths. 5. Theories and explanations. To this day, no one knows exactly what happened on Vintom Hill, but over the decades, several theories have emerged, each attempting to explain the baffling scene and the strange choices that led two men to die with metal masks over their eyes. One of the most widely discussed theories revolves around the cryptic note found inside of Miguel's pocket, instructions to arrive at a specified time, ingest capsules, and wait for a signal. This has led many to believe the men died of an accidental drug overdose. During the 1960s, psychedelic drug experiments were not uncommon, especially among fringe spiritualist communities. The theory goes that Manuel and Miguel consumed a hallucinogenic substance, possibly as part of a ritual intended to reach a higher state of consciousness or establish telepathic communication. Their lead masks, according to this idea, were meant to shield their eyes from a blinding light, perhaps a symbolic or spiritual phenomenon that they expected to encounter. Supporting their explanations were the materials found in their homes, scraps of lead matching the masks, metal cutters, and literature on scientific spiritualism. However, the theory is weakened by major investigative failure. Due to the advanced decomposition of their bodies, toxicological tests were never completed. No capsules were ever found at the scene, and without forensic confirmation, the overdose explanation remains speculative. Another theory pulls the case into the geopolitical shadows of the Cold War era. Some have suggested that the men, as electronics technicians, were involved in a secret government or private experiments, possibly related to signal testing or radiation exposure. The formal suits and cryptic instructions might point to a planned demonstration or covert meeting, and the lead masks could be interpreted as improvised shielding. However, there is no hard evidence tying them into espionage, secret research, or any known government project. No radioactive traces were discovered at the site, and their backgrounds, while technical, did not link them to military or intelligence operations. There's also the theory rooted in cultural context, the spiritualist explanation. According to Elcio Gomez, as we know, the men were part of a broader movement of scientific spiritualists, electronic enthusiasts who believed they could bridge science and mysticism to contact aliens or spiritual entities. Gomez claimed they conducted seances, building experimental devices, and regularly engaged in rituals aimed at transcending normal perception. In this view, the masks were not protective gear for the physical world, but also tools to prepare for metaphysical contact. The theory aligns with the items found at the scene and the victims' homes, but it too lacks a clear causal link to their deaths. And then, inevitably, comes the UFO rumors. Brazil in the 1960s was caught in the grip of its own wave of UFO fever. Reports of strange lights and objects in the sky were common, even among military personnel. One of the most cited reports connected to the case came from a woman named Gracinda Barbosa Coutinho de Souza. She told the police that on the same evening the men were believed to have died, she saw a glowing orange oval floating above Vinton Hill. It had a fiery ring around its edges, hovering silently before vanishing. Her husband returned to the area moments later, but the object was gone. In the days that followed her report, several others in the area came forward to say that they too had seen something similar, although only after her story was made public. This led some to suggest that Manuel and Miguel believed they were meeting something or someone from beyond. According to Miguel's sister, they had mentioned that important but secret mission shortly before his death. Whether that mission was earthly or otherworldly, we will likely never know. There's also the possibility that what the woman saw wasn't extraterrestrial at all, but the result of an experiment the men were conducting. After all, Alcio Gomez told authorities that just 2 months earlier, the trio had attempted to use a device in Miguel's backyard to make contact with otherworldly entities. That device exploded. Maybe they were trying again, this time on a remote hill. Whatever your stance is on alien visitations, what's certain is that these men believed in something, and they may have gone to extreme lengths in pursuit of it. What remains is a case without a definitive answer. Each theory presents a partial explanation, but none can account for every detail. Perhaps the truth lies at the intersection of several ideas: ritual, miscalculation, and secrecy. Whatever the case, Manuel and Miguel ascended that hill with a purpose only they fully understood, and they never came back down to explain it. 6. A confession or a last-ditch story? In 1969, 3 years after the lead masks case dumbfounded Brazilian authorities, a convicted smuggler named Hamilton Dizani came forward with a sensational confession. Already serving a 50-year sentence in a Sao Paulo prison, Dizani had little to lose, and perhaps something to gain, when he told investigators that he had been involved in the deaths of Manuel Pereira de Cruz and Miguel Jose Viana. According to Dizani, while hiding out in Rio de Janeiro, he was approached by 3 associates, operating under the aliases Espanjol, Asasio, and Wilson Alameo. They offered him a job with high payoff, a hit in Niterói. The plan, he claimed, involved targeting 2 men during a seance in a spiritualistic center run by a woman named Helena, who allegedly orchestrated the entire affair. Dizani told police the group attended the seance, during which they identified their targets, Manuel and Miguel, as fellow participants. According to this account, the men were known to be carrying a large sum of cash, information allegedly passed along by an insider within the group. After the seance, the group offered the 2 technicians a ride, driving them to the base of Vinton Hill under the pretense of transformation. What followed, if Dizani is to be believed, is chilling. He claimed to have stayed behind in the vehicle while his associates marched Manuel and Miguel up the hill. They returned about 30 minutes later with a briefcase full of money. One of the men reportedly declared, "We have killed them both. We forced them at revolver point to take the poison." Dizani even provided poetic details, quoting Wilson Alamao as saying, "The spirit of fortune has descended but will soon incarcerate in other bodies." It was a strangely mystical flourish for a man confessing to murder. The police took the confession seriously enough to investigate, but they quickly found inconsistencies in this confession and realized that he just wanted to get to Niterói and escape while he was there. And so the police were once again left with nothing. As for Dizani, he was thrown back into prison. 7. Aftermath. In the 7 years following the deaths of Manuel and Miguel, the lead masks case refused to fade away. Instead, it spiraled into a tangled web of conflicting testimonies, strange revelations, and half-hearted investigations. In May 1969, District Attorney Edmo Letterbach, who had overseen the case, was transferred to a new location. His successor, showing little interest in the unsolved mystery, promptly requested that the case be closed, despite the fact that the police investigation was still technically ongoing. But the lead masks case was far from over. A month later, in June of 1969, police revealed a bizarre clue that they had missed. A smaller paper note found beside the bodies, bearing just one word: bonsai. Police claimed that a cult of Japanese origin, active in Niterói, frequently used this word in their rituals. Some of the cult's members were questioned, but the investigation stalled once more. The note, like so many other clues, led nowhere. In July of 1969, another potential lead emerged when Valdir Soares, a well-known criminal in Rio, claimed to know the men who had killed Manuel and Miguel. He alleged that 2 prisoners in Sao Paulo, one known as Spaniard and the other known as Spider-Man, were responsible. Given the embarrassment caused by Hamilton Bazzani's dubious confession just months earlier, police approached this new claim cautiously. Their investigation revealed nothing substantial, and the story faded. By October 1969, the case took another strange turn when a notorious fugitive known as Professor Ramayana, real name Alexandre Monteiro Salvaneto, was linked to the case. Ramayana, a self-proclaimed expert in parapsychology who lived near Vintem Hill, was known for his bizarre experiments. Tracked to Recife, Ramayana escaped capture by allegedly hiding inside a refrigerator. Over the next few years, he was arrested multiple times, first in Rio, then in Fortaleza, only to escape repeatedly, often boasting of his magical powers and hypnotic abilities. By 1973, police finally captured him for good, and yet despite his capture, there was no serious follow-up on his connection to the lead masks case. The strangeness didn't end there. In April of 1980, Jacques Vallée, a respected academic and UFO researcher who had worked with NASA, traveled to Brazil to investigate the mystery firsthand. Vallée climbed Vintem Hill, interviewed the police and reporters who had been involved, and noted something unsettling. The spot where the bodies had been found was still barren, as though marked by something unnatural. His observations were later published in the prologue of his book, Confrontations, a scientist's search for alien contact. Finally, in 1992, one of the first reporters to cover the case, Mario Diaz, dedicated a chapter of his book, Malditos Reporters de Policia, Damned Police Reporters, to the case. He expressed his own belief that the two men may have been poisoned by cicuta, a highly toxic plant, but this theory, like so many others, was never proven. The lead masks case, even decades later, seemed incapable of closure. The strange deaths of two ordinary technicians spiraled into a bizarre narrative filled with secret societies, dubious confessions, UFO sightings, and criminals who may have only existed in rumors. And through it all, the original question remained: what happened on Vintem Hill, and why? 8. My theory. So, after examining the confusing, twisting narrative of the lead masks case, it has become clear to me that the most plausible explanation is a tragic combination of misguided beliefs, dangerous experimentation, and critical investigative failures. I think Manuel Pereira de Cruz and Miguel Jose Viana were undeniably involved in a form of spiritualistic practice, likely part of a broader movement of so-called scientific spiritualists who sought to blend mysticism with science. Their association with Elcio Gomez, who openly admitted to participating in similar experiments, is a significant clue. It is difficult to believe that Gomez, who shared their interests and claimed to have conducted spiritualist experiments with them, would be entirely ignorant of their intentions on Vintem Hill that day. But the idea of a criminal gang murdering the two men seems far less credible. Not only is there no concrete evidence of violence or robbery, but the confessions proved by criminals like Hamilton Bazzani were riddled with contradictions that were never substantiated. These stories appeared more as fabrications, attempts by desperate men to trade dubious information for leniency or attention. Instead, my theory is that the most likely scenario is that Manuel and Miguel overdosed, whether intentionally or accidentally, as part of a ritual or experiment. The cryptic notes detailing capsule consumptions aligned with this theory. Perhaps they believed the capsules would enhance their perceptions, allowing them to contact otherworldly entities. Given their involvement with scientific spiritualism, this idea is entirely consistent with their beliefs. But due to the catastrophic failure of the investigation, most notably the delayed autopsies and the complete lack of toxicology testing, we will never know for certain. Key evidence was lost and critical questions were never answered. Did they take a lethal dose of hallucinogenic substance? Were they under the influence when they lay down with their lead masks, awaiting for some perceived signal? We cannot say. And the lead masks case, through decades of confusion, remains an unsolved mystery, defined more by speculation and missed opportunity than by the truth. And so we have come to the end. The lead masks case remains an unsolved enigma, a strange, tragic puzzle shaped by spiritualism, secrecy, and confusion. Two men seeking answers, perhaps to a question only they understood, ended their lives on a lonely hillside under bizarre circumstances. Were they a part of a dangerous experiment, victims of their own beliefs, or was something else at play? Decades later, we are still left guessing. But what do you think? Was it an experiment gone wrong, a deadly ritual, or something more sinister? Please let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this mystery, please like, subscribe, and share. And let us know if there are some more mysteries that you would like to hear. Stay curious, and I will see you in the next one.